Hello everyone, welcome to another one of our post-event content webinars. So today I'm joined by Shannon and Ben. They're going to talk to you about cloud migrations and what's available to you and different journeys that you can take. It's just continuing our thread of, really about empowering your future with your JDE Edwards and just giving you different options of where you can take each of your journeys or where you are at the moment with your JDE Edwards instance. So with that, I'm really happy to have the guys on board, and I'll hand it over to Shannon.
Fantastic, thanks Andrew. So Ben and I have decided to produce this a little bit differently, and luckily we've got different opinions on cloud migration. So hopefully we'll be able to ask each other some questions and really deep dive into what our customers are asking us every day of the week about cloud migrations. I'm sure between us we've probably got 30, 40, 50 cloud migrations under our belts. Ben?
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, no, I've got a few as well.
Yeah, great. So, well, I was adding yours, but what we want to do is just talk about the sorts of things we hear from our customers, and you can hear about our different opinions. And of course, I think what you're going to find at the end of the day is cloud migrations are quite often a bit of a personal journey, and of course, you're going to add up the specific attributes of your site and your requirements and your needs, and that might lead to an obvious decision, but we want to try and give you some of those additional pieces of information to assist you in that journey.
Yeah, and
so we've got a little bit of a slide.
Sorry, yeah, it'd be good to talk through these as well in a more casual manner and actually pull apart some of the details that we generally get asked on quite a regular basis. So, yep.
Absolutely. And so what we thought we'd do is initially just, the big question, I guess, on everyone's lips is quite often which cloud. And then we're going to dive a little bit more into rehosting, or that's your traditional lift and shift, or reshaping / refactoring your cloud workload. And JDE Edwards is a good tenant for both of those, but we'll talk through some advantages of either of those mechanisms to get to the cloud. We'll talk quite specifically about database options. As I'm sure you're aware, it's probably the biggest decision you're going to make, housing that database within the cloud and making sure that that's performant and has recoverability options is critical. So we're going to give you some hints and tips on that decision-making process. We're going to talk about security, and that's security probably more focused outside of JDE Edwards and outside of the F00950. We're going to talk about how the cloud can contribute to your security posture. We're going to discuss how much time you've got over the weekend, and if you don't know that, if you don't know the amount of outage that your business can sustain for a cloud migration, you must go and find out, because that will dictate a number of the decisions that you need to do along the way, and it'll also completely change the plan of getting your JDE Edwards workload to the cloud. So we will discuss that one in more detail. And one of our classic debating points is, look, whether you want to do tools or apps when you do your cloud migration. And you may detect from my my man here smiling is that we may have a difference of opinion here, but that's good as well. That's healthy, because it's nice to discuss.
Yeah, don't yell at me this time though, Shannon.
and then finally, just a bit of a wrap. So just talk about what we've discussed, etc. So without further ado, let's get into it. So look, deciding on a cloud is difficult, and we could say we could lay our cards on the table, and I could say, if you were just to ask me where I'd put something, I'd probably base my decisions on my experience. And Ben, if I was to ask you, which cloud would you choose out of the three that we've got on the board there? What would make your decision, or what do you factor in?
So I'd factor in, if I was on a client side, I'd factor in strategically where I'm going, where are my licenses primarily held, and am I looking for more of a cost-effective option, or am I looking for a cloud construct that is going to give me a lot of the native constructs out of the cloud that are really going to advance my installation of JD Edwards. Essentially complement and extend that by using things like AI and scalability, as well as, log monitoring as an example like that. So you really have to factor in all of those to make that decision. At Fusion 5, we're cloud agnostic, so we're not going to push you down one cloud construct or another. It's really beneficial to what it is you're wanting to get out of it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess, look, a lot of customers, if we get invited to do a cloud selection for a customer, the sorts of things we try and document for our customers is on the list here. Because what we want to do is we want to make that decision. We want to write down the reason we made that decision. So if that's questioned in 1, 2, 3, 5 years' time, that the business understands exactly why we chose the particular cloud in question to house JD Edwards. Because as we know, JDE is a really good cloud tenant. It can sit on any one of the clouds that we've listed out here. But if we're documenting this for a customer, if we're doing a cloud selection, the sorts of things we look at is price, and number one, price. And we're talking about that 5-year plan, because we want to understand how much JD Edwards is going to cost, and that's production and non-production for 5 years. And then we can make a really fair evaluation on all of these clouds. And Ben and I have both used the cloud cost calculators. And look, you do need a little bit of knowledge to understand exactly what you need to price, because understanding data egress or data ingress, or how much does a application load balancer cost, all of those things are really important. But what Ben and I will tell you is that if you cost your storage, if you cost your machines, and most importantly, if you cost your database, and compare those three, you need not worry about all the other things, because they'll come up to about 5% of your bill. But the really important things are database, machines, and storage. And once you get that right, you'll have a pretty good comparison between those three clouds. The next thing we to document is stability. And I think that's where we talk about the concept of availability zones, or availability domains, as they're called in Oracle Cloud. Both other clouds are availability zones, and regions. And so it's really good for you to understand regional failovers and what you're going to classify disaster recovery as, and then ensure that the cloud that you choose, even considering data sovereignty, because in Australia and New Zealand, data sovereignty is pretty important for where you're going to put your workload, because quite often Australian statute dictates that has to be actually existing in Australian soil. So you need to understand that and overlay that with your stability and regional failover requirements. Ben talked about this, and it is the innovation that's built into the fabric of that cloud. And all three that are listed here, these are enterprise clouds, these are enterprise public clouds, and they are innovating consistently and continuously, and they're adding additional cloud constructs, I'd say almost on a weekly basis. So that I think each of these would probably have over 400 different cloud things that you could subscribe to, and that could be used for JD Edwards, or it could be all used to make your existence in the cloud a little bit more reliable, a little bit more stable, and a little bit more innovative. And as Ben said, it's the IoT, it's the wrapping JD Edwards in these modern cloud constructs, so you're getting the right tool for the right job. I think skills, Ben, is super important. Like, we find often that if a customer has some experience or skills in a particular cloud, that they will continue to double down and invest on that cloud.
Absolutely.
I think we see reticence. Yeah, currently we're seeing a bit of reticence for the complete multi-cloud layout. So we're not seeing that level of maturity. I think it'll come, don't get me wrong. I think that's part of the journey. But at the moment, we're seeing that our customers will choose a cloud and commit to that cloud and extend their footprint on that particular cloud.
Exactly. I just want to echo that as well, is that we're seeing that customers are choosing a cloud, sticking to that cloud. But if I was to use a crystal ball and look into the future, you potentially are going to see opportunities where some clouds are going to branch off and they're going to have innovation, or they're going to have some sort of technology that differentiates them from another cloud construct. And we're going to start to see some bleeding in that area outside of those clouds to leverage those services as well. Things like containerization as well. And I don't want to sort of steal your thunder with what's coming up, but I think there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline in that area that is going to sort of show that through.
Yeah, look, I completely agree, Ben. I think that people's use of Terraform and people's use of Ansible and people's use of these, and of course, containerization and Kubernetes and Docker, this is going to change the cloud workload. This, you know, I appreciate that the data has to be close to the CPU, and we know that we can't survive in a highly latent environment. But I think the opportunity to lay down a workload on multi-cloud, that's going to be a reality. I can't look into the crystal ball and say when, but that's, you know, an exciting space, especially when these clouds have something like a spot market where you can say how much you're prepared to pay for 20 CPUs, for 40 CPUs, and you could put your JDE Edwards batch workload down there and run those intensive jobs. Exciting space. Anyway, look, I think, oh, just one more thing, and I think we both acknowledge this also, cloud is sticky, you know, and we've written their partner for life, but a cloud is a very sticky thing. If you start to put your workload into the cloud, if you're not thinking generic, if you're not using Terraform, you may be investing heavily in their individual constructs, and you might find that's difficult to lift out of that particular cloud. So that's something that you can watch. But once you start down this journey, I think we're finding our customers at the moment that they are sticking with the cloud that they choose. Right. I think what we want to talk about here is
Shannon.
Thanks, Ben. What we want to talk about here, it's a little bit confusing from the beginning, but if you're starting down this journey and your partners, so if you're considering cloud migration and your partners are not talking about the 6 Rs of cloud migration, and this is vendor agnostic. This is an approach to look at all of your workloads across your enterprise and decide which is appropriate for that particular workload when you migrate to the cloud. Now, what we're going to find is we're really going to focus in on my gray circle there. As you can tell, I do my own slides. That's how terrible they look. But and it's not a circle; it's a rectangle. But we're going to talk about rehosting options and replatforming options. So again, a rehost is a lift and shift. And if you look at this first rehost decision, it's whether you're going to do a manual rehost or an automatic rehost. So if you're using an automatic rehost, all of the public clouds that we listed before, Oracle, AWS, Azure, have some pretty nifty tools for automatically rehosting on-premise workloads to the cloud. And that's using V2V backup technologies across their virtual private networks, but essentially copying the entire machine images over to the cloud and standing them up. Oh, and good question for you, Ben. If I have a Windows workload, does that work in Oracle Cloud?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I'm not going to get into the nuances of licensing, but if you've got a Windows workload and it's on VMware as an example at the moment, you can cut that VMDK and you can upload that directly into Oracle Cloud as a concept if you'd like, and begin your journey at that point.
And let's reverse that question. Can I run Linux on Azure?
Yeah. Absolutely, you can. You can run. One thing you can't run is you cannot run an AS400 in the cloud.
We might get to that.
Oh, can we? Great.
So we talked about the auto hosting and using those cloud tools for the specific cloud that you're moving to, and then we've got manual rehosting, and that could be using one click, that could be using just reinstallation, old school technology of rehosting. Remember, a rehost is not replatforming. A rehosting is pretty much machines as is, workload as is, running JDE Edwards 24/7 in the cloud. Now, what we try and do with our customers is, again, do a 5-year plan with return on investment, and we try and massage the JDE Edwards workload to get a little bit more savings by using more of the native cloud constructs. And what I mean by that is replatforming JDE Edwards to use some auto scale capabilities to shut down non-production environments at night, to scale up your machines based upon load, but most importantly, scale down your machines based upon load. So what we try and do at Fusion 5, and no matter what cloud, we try and build a elastic architecture and use Terraform to lay that down onto your cloud of choice. But what that will do is, if you look at the costs of running that workload over the 5-year period, there is significant savings over time because you're not running all of your machines 24/7, and you've got the ability to scale that workload. And so the additional investment that you might spend up front doing the Reshape replatform, it definitely pays itself off over time, and it actually creates a more manageable environment in the public cloud.
One thing sorry, Shannon, one thing I also want to do is just on that replatform piece there, if you're running a JDE Edwards installation that's still possibly on Windows Server 2003, God, I hope there's not that many, or 2008 as an example, that's a really good opportunity to replatform and actually question that platforming as well. Do I want to stay on Windows? Do I want to stay on Oracle Enterprise version 5 as an example? And then make that decision to go down that path, rather than just lifting that, putting that into the cloud, and then making that decision once you're in the cloud. It's probably a good opportunity to start having those discussions at that point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. And also, if you're replatforming, it certainly does give you the ability to dip your toes into, again, things like Terraform or Ansible, and
Absolutely.
potentially for our more advanced clients, when you get your landing zone in your public cloud, that you can start to maybe put that landing zone or put all of your infrastructure as code into a CI/CD pipeline, and then completely manage all of your cloud through a Git repository and through maintaining that environment through a CI/CD. So you've got the ability to run that up in non-production exactly as you might with production. So it gives our customers a lot of power and a lot of understanding of how the cloud works at enterprise scale. Okay, well, again, what we want to talk about now is, I think it is the core decision, and it will be, I guarantee, actually, well, Ben might correct me, but I'm pretty sure this will be the most expensive component you run in your cloud as well, because you do have to have a very solid database platform for JDE Edwards in the cloud. As we know, JDE is supports heterogeneous databases, so you could run DB2 UDB, you can run an AS400, but that being said, not in the clouds that we're specifying here. You can run SQL, you can run SQL Server, or you can run an Oracle database. And I guess when an application is flexible about the databases that it can talk to, then it's not using some of those advanced database functionality for performance reasons. And so therefore what JDE Edwards does is it sends some pretty simple statements to the database. So maybe joins 2, maybe at most joins 3 tables together, sorts absolutely everything. But in terms of the statements it's running at the database, it's fairly simple. So what does that mean? It means you need to ensure that that the data is close to the CPU, and that starts to cost money. How do you get the data closer to the CPU? Well, I think you've got to use a lot more memory. So you've got to allocate dedicated memory. You can pin certain tables into memory, and all databases give us the ability to do these things. And then we want to also get super fast disks. So however we build our database, we want to allocate super fast disks. So lots of memory, super fast disks, get the data close to the CPUs. And then you'll have a performant environment in the cloud, because JDE Edwards, I've found, has read to write ratios of 10:1, even 20:1 in some sites. So it's a massive amount of read compared to write. We need to be viewing that data quickly. I think also, you need to, we talked about the availability zones and we talked about regional recovery previously, but make sure you consider that in your choice of database. Now, it's interesting. So if I was if I had an Oracle database, in the Oracle Cloud, Ben, what are my options for housing that database in Oracle Cloud?
So if you've got an Oracle database in the Oracle Cloud, there's many options that you've got. You can actually spin up a virtual machine and you can install the Oracle database on that machine yourself. Now, that lends itself to a lot of maintenance, and your DBA is going to be very busy patching and keeping that up to date and making sure the memory and the performance is adequate for what it is at the time. Because the thing is that your data is not going to be static. It is going to grow over time. The other option that you've got is you've got database as a service. Now, I'm not talking about autonomous database at the moment, but database as a service. So you can spin up a database in the Oracle Cloud where it will do a lot of that maintenance for you. It'll let you know when there's a patch ready. It'll actually manage some of the performance for you to a degree as well, but it takes a lot of that heavy maintenance out of it as well. Now, as you go from that point as well, that's when your costs start to rise. Then you can get to the point where you can actually have an Oracle autonomous database. Now, this is essentially where you can have a OLTP database as a service. You spin it up, it will manage everything from performance through to patch management. It'll do its own health rectification as well. It's essentially just giving you the TNS name to put into JD Edwards to use that data, hands off, no DBA required, and it'll just provide that data to you as a service. As I said, sliding scale of cost as you go to that option there, but you've got quite a few options there if you wanted to leverage that database. So yeah, and JD Edwards works with them all.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess from my experience, and maybe yours too, Ben, we're finding a lot of our customers will choose database as a service opposed to building a virtual machine in the cloud, installing their database binaries, and then trying to manage that. And we see, because our cloud providers are doing all the heavy lifting for us. They're doing the automatic recovery across availability zones. They're doing the automatic switchover. They're doing minor patching that doesn't contain an outage for us. They're doing all the heavy lifting for us so that we just get to enjoy what is a stable database platform in the cloud.
Absolutely, yeah. It takes a lot of that heavy lifting from your DBA, as I said, away from that, and it allows you to also have 4 nines availability at your database. So if there is some sort of hardware failure or there is some issue with the machine as well, it's got that native construct in the back end that'll just take care of that for you. So you don't need to worry about, is my database performing poorly? Is my database got a dropped disk? Is my rack going to fail over? Why do I need to fail it over? It'll handle all that for you.
Yeah, fantastic. And I also believe, I think Oracle on Oracle and SQL on Azure, they've got advanced options like autoscale for CPUs, which is amazing. So we've never had this in database technology before, but when you run Oracle on Oracle and when you run, Microsoft on Microsoft Cloud, you get a few more buttons and a few more levers that you can pull and push to make the most out of that, I guess, database in the cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. And the CPU, it's quite interesting to see when I did the Oracle Autonomous Database course. It's quite interesting to see. They give you some scripts that show you that when you set your throttling on the CPU and what you're allowing it to grow by, it does it without the application even knowing that it's occurred. So the performance is adjusted as you go. And then when you don't need it, it scales it right back as well. So you're not paying for that over allocation of CPU.
Yep. No, that's great. So look, lots of choices there. And again, depending on your cloud would depend on the service. So for example, if you wanted to run if you wanted to run Oracle in Azure, you would have to build a virtual machine and you would have to install the Oracle database and run that machine. So there are no other options there. Just like in the Oracle Cloud, if you wanted to run SQL Server, you need to install the SQL Server binaries on that Windows machine to be able to run JD Edwards. I do say Windows because that's the supported SQL Server database engine for JD Edwards.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, and AWS, it's got a light mention here, but it does have as a service Oracle, and it does have as a service SQL Server, and to avoid all court cases here, we're not going to talk to you about your licensing options there, are we, Ben?
No. But can I use MongoDB for my JDE installation, Shannon?
As at the current MTRs, no, that's not going to work. Look, it's all getting better. Amazing backup opportunities, and again, as we said, we've got many referenceable clients using database as a service on all these clouds for some pretty significant JDE workloads. Next slide. Right, security. We wanted to just discuss a little bit about, like, you know, Ben and I both understand JDE Edwards security and securing JDE Edwards within the application and making sure that you've got appropriate segregation of duties, etc. But venturing to the cloud gives you way more control over that external security than previously you might have been responsible for. And of course, once again, this depends on the maturity of the landing zone that you're putting down for this initial implementation. So quite often we see our cloud providers now have some expansive and comprehensive best practices for laying down an environment. And what those best practices include for your landing zone is many of these baseline security options. So AWS, Azure, and Oracle all have these threat intelligence services. They all have our network firewalls. They all have WAFs. They all give you a comprehensive ability to secure that JDE Edwards workload from externals coming into JDE. Now, of course, even if you were to implement JDE Edwards in the cloud, you may only still allow external access from your internal network. So you might have a couple of pipes to your cloud provider, because of disaster recovery and high availability requirements. But you have 2 pipes to your cloud provider. But you could still enforce that nobody from the internet can come through and log into JDE Edwards. That they have to traverse all your existing switches and firewalls and all your existing on-premise safeguards before they get to your cloud of choice. And then once they're in your cloud of choice, then you can begin to do additional levels of firewalling and threat detection. And so we've really taken a few screenshots here, but knowing that you have the ability to turn on this type of monitoring and understand if people are doing too much HTTP traffic, or if people are doing certain activities that the threat detection software deems as inappropriate, that they'll be shutting down those connections quickly to avoid any problems for your organization.
A question, Shannon, that I've got on this, and a loaded one. Does Amazon GuardDuty and Azure Sentinel, does that replace the existing antivirus and firewalls that I've got currently on my applications?
That's a good question. So the firewalling again turns virtual, but if you've got existing on-machine antivirus and on-machine firewalling, those can exist as they currently do in the cloud. So you can choose to firewall at a guest OS level, and of course you need to maintain your virus threat detection as well, because although GuardDuty and it can recognize the outbound connections and stop them, you don't want anything malicious on your servers at the end of the day either. So you would continue to maintain that level of threat detection as part of your overall security posture.
Yep. So from what I understand, though, with CloudTrail and VPC log flows, though, we're essentially allowing the cloud constructs. And again, talking about wrapping JDE Edwards around with these cloud constructs, we can, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is what we can do is we can monitor for events and we can understand what's happening within our system, and we can apply possibly machine learning and AI against that to be able to be proactive. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and the big advantage is that that the machine learning and the artificial intelligence and the rules engines are based upon the services. So the threat intelligence service is continually learning about particular vulnerabilities that are being exposed. And because it's learning all the time, you don't have to apply these additional algorithms to your JD Edwards or your cloud instance, because it has the responsibility of learning that and stopping those threats. So it's a really exciting place to be. Yes, you turn it on, you enable it, but then you get the advantage of all of its intelligence to prevent threats in your cloud or in your instance of that cloud. Yeah, amazing. And we will talk also about, and you did touch on a little bit of what I'd call it a bit of extra for experts, but when you lay down JD Edwards properly in the cloud, you start to use the base cloud log monitoring tools over the top of your JD Edwards instance. Now that of course can be your HTTP logs, which is a pretty important, I guess, log mining opportunity for what IP addresses are connecting through to JD Edwards and how much data you're sending to those IP addresses. Now that also can feed threat detection services, but you can mine that for stability and logging purposes as well, and also bring that into your JAS logging and bring that into your enterprise server logging, so you get a complete 360-degree view of what's going on in your JD Edwards instance in the cloud. So it's an amazing opportunity for debugging and troubleshooting if you set it up right. Look, a common question, and again, this can be answered. This sort of question can be answered with a consulting exercise to really put a project plan together so that you understand how long it will take you to get to the cloud, and that's an important thing, to get a project plan and to get a scope, and then to be able to take that to the business for the appropriate amount of budget. But how long will a cloud migration take? And I've got their OGS safe harbor statement, because please, we won't enter into any contracts with anyone on the basis of what we're about to say. What we're trying to do is give you an idea of how long these things might take and what we've seen previously. And if you get best case and if you get worst case, and then you can understand that your migration is somewhere in the middle. Now, so unfortunately, the answer is it does depend. And if you're doing that re-platforming, reshaping exercise of your JD Edwards workload, as you see the business value, we're getting more business value out of that process, because if we look at the y-axis of this graph, we're going further up the axis than our Rehost, but it does cost more money. So it will cost more money and time to do a proper reshaping of the JD Edwards workload, but you are going to get more business value out of those changes. And remember, so that they will take longer. Now, Ben and I have been involved again in many JD Edwards cloud migrations. I've personally been involved in some, and these are non-production moves, but to get a non-production JD Edwards workload working in the cloud, we've seen less than 5 working days. I've got there less than 4 working days with a terabyte database load. That was an Oracle database. Upload that into the cloud, generate all the indexes. Sure, we might have chosen a pretty impressive database class to do all that in a very small amount of time, but guess what? You can do that. You can choose a 30 license pending, again, so safe harbor state license pending. You can choose a monster machine that's going to crunch your indexes and stand up your database in a very small amount of time and do all your upgrade activities, and then you can declass that particular instance. And especially if you're in Oracle Cloud, then there are a lot more licensing opportunities for you to be able to do things like that. So really exciting space to bring up the spec of the machines for the go live weekend and bring it back down for your production workload. So these are things you could never do on-prem, and that's incredible. Now, we've also seen other complex, really large, multi-thousand user sites. They take a little bit longer. So they've taken up to 9 months. This is upgrade included. So this is upgrade to release 22. This is on-premise cloud migration with upgrade. So there's quite a bit, there's retrofit, and there's
testing.
Generally, we like to, Yeah, testing. Thanks, Ben. And generally, we try to keep the integrations exactly the same when we do these cloud migrations, and it's super possible. Same FTP, SFTP, FTP, same. Try and get everything working as they used to be to minimize what can go wrong from an integration point of view. But it can take quite a bit of time depending on the retrofit and the testing for a customer.
It's very interesting though, Shannon, where you've got your rehost and your replatform, and then you've got your dotted line back to refactor. Are you essentially saying that the cloud migration approach could take, obviously one of many options, but you could lift what you've got and then rehost that into the cloud, and then take the next step to then refactor to take advantage of those cloud constructs, potentially even doing the upgrade in the cloud rather than moving your data across from an on-prem to a cloud construct?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. Refactor for core JD Edwards is not an option because refactor involves recoding or changing the core parts of JD Edwards. And as we don't have the source code, we're not going to refactor that workload. But you're totally right. Everything around JD Edwards, and you think of Orchestration Studio and how that has matured the way we integrate with JDE. And you wrap that in an amazing integration framework like the Fusion 5 framework to give you reliable integrations into JDE via Orchestration Studio. Then you can, amazing, great sell there. But then you could totally refactor all of those components around JD Edwards. And you know that motto at Fusion 5 is the right tool for the right job. JD Edwards is a fantastic, secure, transactional, financial, CAM and manufacturing engine. It is amazing at that. But if we want to do some really cool IoT, or if we want to do some really cool big data, we may choose other, native cloud constructs to support us in that journey. So right tool for the right job, totally. Refactor your integration componentry, refactor your data visualization, refactor many things around JD Edwards, but JD is always going to be a replatform.
Excellent. Yeah.
Okay. Look,
this
again,
is the exciting
super
stuff.
important. We did talk. Yeah, talk about this. We did talk about this on the first slide. But understand the cutover weekend. We've seen it go. I guess when we get involved with the project, we make sure all these boxes are ticked. But for our customers out there, and there's many customers that aren't with us, ensure that you understand how long you can be without JD Edwards over the weekends. And remember to think about integrations because they're becoming so much more important for all of our customers all the time. And guess what? Integrations are sometimes harder to turn off. So if you've got an e-com solution, if you've got some sort of B2B solution, you've be able to shut down those orders or pause those orders until you can move JD Edwards into the cloud and switch them on again. So really important to understand what is your window of opportunity over the upgrade weekend, and then you've got to understand, and your technical people have to tell you how much data you need to move and coerce and convert and migrate during that same amount of time. And we've got to see if these two things can line up. Because if they don't, then we have to start pre-converting data, or potentially using some technology like Golden Gate or StarQuest to keep your cloud database in sync with your on-prem database so that cutover can almost be instantaneous because every transaction is being repeated over to the cloud. So therefore, of course, you still need to do some reconciliations, but the amount of time you need to take your system down is significantly reduced because you've done a lot of work up front. So the project is much more complex. And I must say, Ben, it reminds me when we talked about the previous customer that took 9 months to do a significant workload over to the cloud, we did have to get live data replication working for that customer. And it was also heterogeneous live database replication. So we were replicating from SQL Server to Oracle live so that we could go live in an appropriate amount of time. So there is a little bit of complexity there.
Yeah, so look, you touched on that as well, and I've seen this on many upgrades and cloud migrations that we've done, is essentially that there's a lot of, essentially what we do is we take cuts of the data to then obviously convert them to get the client upgraded. And within the project plan, we've got only so many of those exercises that we can do. And what we generally do is the time frame of backing up that data, restoring that data, converting that data, testing that data will generally come down as we get better at each one of those runs. And I think, would it be fair to say, Shannon, that once you start to do your first 1 to potentially 2 of those data migrations, that the approach that you're doing, you need to really nail that down and get that well documented, because you don't want to be changing tact to the lead up of the go live weekend?
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And look, the first one, it's generally a bit of a crapshoot. I've got to be honest, because there's a lot of moving parts. So we don't generally time the first one. I think that's just about, of course, you reconcile the first conversion's not about timing. The second one's absolutely reconciliation and timing, so that the business knows what we'll need. And then you have to map that back to the window of opportunity, which we talked about before. One thing that I'm really passionate about when I do my upgrade projects is to ensure that every single person that's been involved in that project, that is involved in the upgrade weekend, performs their part on every mock go live. So what's critical, because what I've seen before in my go lives is that the business will get there on the weekends, they'll run their reconciliation reports and they'll notice a problem. But guess what? That problem's been there for the last 12 months. It's just that's what it is. So really, really critical that everyone that has a role in the upgrade project performs that role, turns off integrations, turns on integrations, reads BI reports, does reconciliations, and then you know it's going to be just another day.
Yep, exactly right. You want to make sure that your dress rehearsals are on time. You're looking for the timing, you're looking for the consistency, so there's no absolute surprises once you get to that go live weekend.
Yeah, totally. So I think, you know, our little bold sentence at the bottom there, if you have 100 gig of data and an entire weekend, don't stress about it. But if you're trying to move 6 terabytes in 4 hours, there might be some requirements for pre-converting data or keeping data in sync.
Yeah, we might need another couple of attempts to make sure we got that one down, Pat.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, we are approaching the end of our presentation here, but something that will get the conversation going is the choice to do apps and tools when you're doing a cloud migration, or do you just do a cloud migration? Every customer, you know, unless customer happens to be on release 22 on-prem, and I've got to be honest, I don't see many of them, but there is an opportunity for customers to do an upgrade when they move to the cloud, or to keep everything consistent. And Ben, you know, I think you should open up the conversation on this one. What do you see your customers?
Friendly fire. Look, the thing is that we're definitely seeing a difference in mindset on applications are now being bundled in ASUs or application software updates like they always have been, but we're seeing that they're cumulative. And the tools releases are very, very much more along that technical aspect of
sorry,
objects.
just a question on that, or a clarification. You're saying that ASUs are cumulative. So so if I get to the latest release 22 and I apply the release 22 ASU or update 7 or whatever that might be, you're saying that actually includes all other updates?
Absolutely, it does. Yes. So what it does is it includes all of the updates from the initial build back in 2015. So if you're on update 6 or release 22 and you want to go to update 7 once it becomes released, it will ignore anything that has been already applied by that release 22 update 6, and it'll only apply the delta between those two.
Right. So the updates continue to get bigger, but as you apply them, it affects less objects. That's pretty cool.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So it's essentially Oracle's way of trying to get you to continue to maintain that code currency, so as we're not actually retouching every single object in there. And look, we've been working with a few clients, and we've got some strategies in which you can take that delta and actually analyze and understand what it is that will impact in your system and what would be part of your testing regime as well. Now, Do we do tools and apps at the same time? Yeah, absolutely we can. There's no dramas in doing tools and apps at the same time. However, you've really got to ask yourself, what is the benefit of doing that? If all I'm wanting to do is move my certification a boundary to include something on the technical front, do I need to include the business to do, retrospective testing on all of their processes? I'd argue no, you don't, unless that tools release is going to affect those applications in one way, shape, or form. As an example, if I'm doing speed voucher entry and all I'm doing is a tools upgrade, and the last time I did a tools upgrade was 6 months ago, and I'm only touching 270 technical objects, do I need to rope finance in for testing on that one? I don't think so. I'd say your risk is relatively low, and you should be able to do that without the business knowing. If I'm going to be updating an ASU and I'm 2 releases behind on that ASU, do I need to rope the business in? Absolutely you do. You need to fully understand what is going to be impacted. You need to understand what testing needs to be achieved. And look, do we have any automated processes in play that can do that? So yeah, look, yes, you can do it all at once. Do you have to? No, you don't.
I think you raised a really good point there, and the point that we totally both agree on is that you need to understand what's changed, what's affected, what you use, and make an informed decision of whether that's going to impact your business or not, and then consider that in the overall approach to this move. Now, I understand that if you don't do any application or tools changes, just do a cloud migration, that's a pretty simple project as well. Like really and truly, your end users should not notice a single difference if you did that. They should go to their favorites. They should just go to the JD Edwards link. You can use the magic of DNS within your organization to go and point to some servers in the cloud. Your users would not, do you think? They wouldn't be able to tell the difference, would they, Ben?
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't. There may be possibly a little bit of slowness with the resolving of that DNS issue, but the DNS resolution. The integrations, however, if you're moving your JD Edwards into the cloud, you may need to repoint some integrations. But your end user at the end of the day should not notice any difference at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I completely agree. And then of course then your testing's easy. The management of your issues is easy because you know it must be to do with the cloud migration. So that makes it more simple from a triage and from a hypercare point of view. But whereas you can also use the cloud as an opportunity to refresh the JD Edwards tools release, to do an application upgrade, to do ESUs, ASUs. But as Ben said, if you're not investing in automated regression testing, this is a really important time where you might consider that, because it could do much of the heavy lifting in terms of the testing of your core objects in your organization and those objects that you rely on every single day. If you can put some basic testing together over the top of those and you schedule that on a daily basis in your production environments, of course they're read-only or they go to non-active business units, or however you want to manage your test cases, we can assist you with that. But then you know that 50 business processes are being run on a daily basis, and once you've done that migration and they continue to work, there's heaps of ticks in the box. Now, it's not bulletproof. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it gives you a pretty good indication of whether things have been successful in your migrations.
Yeah, and the thing as well, moving forward with tools upgrades in particular, Shannon, is that, look, these are released on a quarterly basis. I'm not saying you've got to take them up every quarter, but if you have a regular pattern of adopting those tools releases, the change delta is so much smaller, which means that everything from your planning through to your actual execution of that and any testing that may be required is greatly reduced. And you can get to a point where your end users don't even know there's an update occurring in the back end of the system. And the beauty of that as well is that your technical footprint continues to mature along the way, which means things like replatforming is easier to do if you ever need to do that again. Things like your ASUs as well, you don't need to worry about matching your ASUs with your tools release anymore. You're just focusing on your ASU, and that's a totally different discussion that we can have in another town hall as well, on how you actually identify all of those objects that have changed, or that delta between where you currently are and that ASU, and focusing on retiring that technical debt. What does my testing scope look like? What is the impact to the business? Do I have to let the business know even? So yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that one.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you know, Oracle via the JD Edwards team, the amazing JD Edwards team, who many are based out of Denver, they're also creating within JD Edwards the ability to be to test things more aggressively. So they're starting to implement blue-green deployments for package builds and tools releases, and also the virtual batch queues. So both of these things that are now baked into JD Edwards allow you to do better reshaping, allow you to use these natively, whichever cloud you decide to use.
Yep. Yeah, they're really getting to a point now where I see in the future that we're not even going to have an outage for a tools upgrade, to be honest, especially with that, you know, zero downtime package build and blue-green deployment with package builds. So yeah, watch that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be awesome for continuous delivery of changes, and also rapid patching, which is critical for many of our customers. Righto, it's wrap time. We've been talking long enough about JD Edwards' journeys to the cloud. I think we're just reiterating that JD Edwards is a really good cloud tenant. It sits well on all three of these public clouds that we've shown you up here, and we you know, there's production referenceability on every single one. We do believe that reshaping or re-platforming your workload is appropriate for return on investment, and I think you'll definitely see in that years 3 to 5 that you're going to save money ongoing if you spend a little bit more time up front reshaping that JD Edwards workload. Super critical to load test. Like with anything like this, I think you need to understand how you measure successful performance now and how you'll continue to monitor that going forward in JD Edwards. So we have our ERP Insights software, but there are many native options that you can use to guarantee your current performance levels. And one thing I always tell my customers is just look at your batch windows. That is a pure indication of performance in JD Edwards, because it's not considering basically the internet or HTML or any other layers. It is database to logic. And if you get a really good understanding of how your batch is performing, that will give you a great understanding of how things are changing at a macro level or at a batch job by batch job level. So really get to understand that well. We talked about this in detail, but get that data as close to your database CPUs as you can, and that's using lots of cache, lots of SGA, lots of fast disks, whatever you can do to get that data traversing the cloud to those CPUs as quickly as possible. And then, you know, if there's ever a question about security and a question like, hey, Ben, should we use HTTP or HTTPS for this internal traffic? What do you say?
HTTP. S.
Yeah, you had one job. No, absolutely. So what we try and do is whenever there's a question on security, that we choose the more secure option, or there has to be a significant business case not to. So yeah, it's going to be HTTPS. It's going to be encryption at rest. It's going to be encryption at transit. It's going to be encrypting 1521 for your database or 1433. We're going to make all these choices, and the cloud helps us with that decision-making process as well. It is the default option for many of the cloud constructs that you stand up to support JD Edwards. And then this is really important, and this is a mindset change, and this might be, you know, some management consulting or something a partner can help you with. But that's updating the way you see your updates and the way you see JD Edwards moving forward, because you need to see it as an evolving platform, and that is getting ready for continuous updates, getting ready, as Ben said, tools releases and updates. We think a yearly uptake of those changes is appropriate, and that is at a speed which many of our customers can consume. But again, it's a customer, it's a, what would you say, it's a subjective journey, and so you have to make that determination for yourselves. But what we see advantageous is if our customers are going to choose when they're going to take those updates, we put in a plan, we put in a schedule, and we make sure we stick to that schedule so that they are receiving the benefits of this continuously improving platform, both from a tools and applications perspective.
Absolutely. And look, irregardless of what system you're running, if you're running a SaaS application as well, same thing. Every time there is a release that becomes available, you need to test that release and make sure that it is viable for your business. It's not going to impact your business. So we're dealing on the same platform as all of those solutions as well. What we're doing is we're making that entire update process, that cadence, so to speak, a background process which is not seen by the business at all. And we want to get to that point where the business doesn't see that a change has occurred at all, that we've actually built in some of those native cloud constructs to assist in that process of getting JD Edwards up to date on a consistent basis.
Yeah, fantastic, awesome. All right, well, look, I hope you've enjoyed our presentation on getting JD Edwards in the cloud. So that's migrating JD Edwards to the cloud and some of the really important decision points that you have to make on that journey. Fusion 5 will be more than happy to help you out with any of those planning sessions or any evaluations or some more deep dives. You just let us know. I just want to thank Ben for co-presenting with me. I think it's a pretty cool format. I really enjoyed this. And I'm going to sign off, and then I'm going to leave Ben to do the final sign.
All right. Look, thank you, Shannon. It's been great to be on here. Maybe we need to start a webcast and call it Two Guys in a JDE Room. All right. Look, thank you very much, everyone. We'll stop the recording there. All right. Bye.
Thank you. See ya. Bye. Bye-bye.